بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد سيد المرسلين في كل وقت وحين. يا ربنا لك الحمد. إلى شرف النبي الفاتحة. Alhamdulillah. So how are y'all doing? Iman is here, mashallah. You guys were all away last week, yeah. Okay, so mashallah. So does anyone have anything that you want to start us off with today? We had some questions, right, from last time? Sidi, Mata. We had some questions from last time that didn't get answered. But other than that, is there anyone who wants to share anything with us? Or remember that our class is a class of people who are on a journey. And part of our class is to support each other on that journey and to share any insights that we have that will benefit other people. So from week to week, it's a journey. And it's always a blessing for us to hear what you've gone through in this week, how it's brought you closer to Allah, and any insights that you've had from your life. Noor has come back from a trip, so maybe Noor can share any insights from that.
The whole avoiding eye contact thing never actually works. It's like, look away, we still get called on. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yesterday I was thinking about progress and the various twists and turns of my own spiritual journey, and thinking about how I used to approach trips or times away from whatever my community of the time was, with a sense of anxiety. Sometimes that the good habits that I'd fallen into were just because the people around me were doing these things, and that it wasn't actually an individually rooted thing. Because I've had times in the past where I'd be in a great routine, have great habits, and then leave the people I was around and find that very shortly after just kind of fell back into bad habits or just lost the good habits. And I realized that it was very much not the case this time, and it was kind of just like a moment of yay, because it was, I think it's been long enough, and the conviction is from I guess a more rooted or a more internal space than just, well, everybody's praying now and everybody's doing this and everybody's saying this. It's actually like more ingrained in me, in my routine, alhamdulillah. And so that was kind of the insight that I had, that if you keep doing something for long enough with the right guides, the right people around you, and for the right reasons, with a true and sincere intention, yani Allah Kareem, and God's gonna help you through, and if you truly want to develop those habits, that He'll take your hand and guide you, alhamdulillah, however that manifests. And it won't be based on a geographic location. It'll be based on you maintaining that state and that intention, and just kind of having grown. So alhamdulillah for that.
Alhamdulillah, that's great. Does anyone else want to share something? Yeah.
Salam. I'm still pretty new to the mosque, so my name's Ghazal. In case I don't come up to you, it's because I'm a little shy. Ghazal, yeah. So I guess, as I said, I'm still pretty new here, and this past week has been pretty transformative for me, just because I've been coming in here and listening to the talks, and About a week ago, my mom had surgery, and it's her 10th surgery. She's at home right now, and so I'm sorry if I come in and out. It's because I have a bit of anxiety about her situation. But I think just in the last month or two, I've had health struggles too. And it's been really hard for me. Like, I've just been dealing with a lot from her, and then myself, and then my dad everyone's got health issues. And just in this past week, I've realized that my health issues are actually not that bad. And I thought it was the end of the world. And just seeing my mom's health and being home, I lived away for a while, I'm just grateful for the little moments. And this past week has made me realize, like, I'm just glad that my parents are alive, and that, alhamdulillah, and that I'm alive, and that, not everything has to be perfect. It's just small. I didn't think I would get emotional at all, so I'm sorry. But it's small steps every day to be grateful. Every morning, every night, just saying thank you to God for another day. And that's kind of where I'm getting at, so, yeah.
MashaAllah. I think we can all go home now. Alhamdulillah. No, that's such a profound message and such a great teaching that you've given us. Thank you so much for sharing that. Alhamdulillah. These breezes of guidance come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they come on the tongue of different people. And they're meant for us, they're meant for each person who's in this room to reflect and to admire how Allah can send guidance into someone's life, and how He gives that person the ability to recognize that guidance and to act upon it. And what a beautiful experience to witness, to experience it yourself, and also to witness it. So this is a great blessing. Thank you so much. May we all become people who appreciate each and every day, each and every breath, and build the foundation of our relationship with God on that shukr, on that gratitude. A foundation that should never ever shake. It shouldn't be something that we visit from time to time, and that each day we have kind of a different foundation that we're standing on, and we have no idea what foundation we're on one day. We have no clue what we're actually standing upon. It shouldn't be like that. Our foundation should be something very constant and secure, and something that we have truly built, so that it is present and it is firm, and from there we can experience the ability to rise and transcend even further, so that it becomes a real springboard for going forward, and not just some kind of land that we visit as a tourist, as a kind of spiritual tourist from time to time, to take in the sights and then go somewhere else. And I think sometimes when we, as people who are trying to experience a life with God, we do that. We kind of go on a kind of spiritual tourism, going from here to there, looking for something that will interest us or excite us in the land of faith, if you like, and looking for a quotation that will, excite us, or looking for a little video that will excite us. And that's not the way to actually journey. You have to actually take that time to truly live the words of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ when he said, "Bunya al-Islamu ala khams." He used that word, built. Islam is built. And none of the words of the Prophet ﷺ is, by mistake or just for a utilitarian purpose or something like that. Each word is chosen to give you a whole ocean of meaning. And so there is this concept then of building a life of Islam, building a life of faith. And amongst the tools or the elements of that building will be the 5 pillars, these expressions of your feelings and your appreciation and your attachment to God. So the 5 pillars that we know. But there are also other elements, and the entire process is a process of building. You're not supposed to be starting fresh every single day, having destroyed your gains perhaps in a huge fight that you had, or in a moment of anger with God, or in a moment of whatever, that you completely destroy what you built, and now you feel that you need to start all over again. This is not how it's meant to be. It's really meant to be this continuous process of building and building and building until you have a very beautiful monument to God's glory, and that other people can come and find refuge inside, and that other people can look to as a kind of a lighthouse of guidance and hope, and so on, and a structure that is like a fortress, so that inside all of the subtlety of your experiences with Allah can be protected by the structure that you've built, the structure of Islam that you've built. Because without any kind of structure, you can lose those subtle feelings. You can lose them. The wind can come and blow out that flame, or you might find that it's impossible to hand that flame down to other people. And so there is a benefit in having a particular sense of foundation, structure, pillars, and so on, and then housing your delicate emotions for God inside that building. So this is all coming from the word of the Prophet ﷺ. Islam is built. And so we can take this meaning, the idea of building, from that teaching. Hamdi, did you want to say something?
We have some questions online. Did you want to answer them now or towards the end?
Is there something new, or is it from the ones from last time?
From last time.
They're from last time? Okay, we'll just, we'll take them at the end.
Okay.
Does anyone want to say anything or add anything? Talk about any experience that you had this week of insight, growth?
So I'm not that eloquent in speaking, but I'll give it a go. So I was taking an online course, and the Sheikh was talking about how all of our souls have already been gathered on a plane before Allah, like in front of Allah, and how we've already met our Creator. So in turn, our body was made from clay, which is things from this world, so we have to nourish it with things like food and drink that comes from this world. But on the other hand, our soul, it's something not, like it belongs to Allah. So we have to nourish it with spiritual things and with faith. So that's why, these, like your heart feels closer to Allah when you listen to Quran, when you go to a good lecture. And so it's so important to not just feed our external body, but also our internal one.
MashaAllah, thank you for sharing that. Barakallahu feekum. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so we are, I think that today, inshallah, we should finish our looking into our relationships and seeking health and joy in our relationships. So the relationship that we want to talk about a little bit today, or the few that we want to talk about today, what I have here is my relationship with my parents. So this is the first thing of today. I mean, we're looking at a list that we started, a few classes ago, but I want us to reflect on our relationship with our parents today. That's number 7 on our list. And if you're carrying on the list from last time or a few times ago. Number 8, to reflect on my feelings or thoughts towards my circumstances in life. And that includes reflecting on how I've dealt with circumstances in the past. What is my relationship with circumstances as they occur to me in life? And that could be health issues, that could be a situation where you don't have a job, it could be a situation where you're unhappy with a particular job or it's not your ideal job. So what does that look like when you have circumstances in your life? What kind of a relationship are you forming with those circumstances through your feelings and your attitudes to them? Number 9, my relationship with, so I'm just giving them to you and we'll go back and talk about them and hear from you. Number 9 is my relationship with religious or Islamic knowledge. So what's the nature of your relationship with religious or Islamic knowledge? How do you feel about it? What's your attitude towards it? Does it seem like something unattainable to you? Does it seem like the be-all, end-all? That is what determines how close you are to God. Does it seem like something that you're satisfied at where you are in terms of Islamic knowledge? So these are questions to answer. And number 10, my relationship to those who teach Islamic knowledge. So how do we feel about people who teach Islamic knowledge? And this is an important question for us today, because things have changed in the public perception of teachers of Islamic knowledge. A lot of things have been challenged, a lot of things have shifted in the way that we perhaps, our community looked at people who taught religious knowledge 100 years ago. Right? There's a different set of criteria by which we try to determine who is a valid teacher of Islamic knowledge. And perhaps some of our trust in teachers of Islamic knowledge has been shaken, or we've had to question certain things. So it's a good question for us to think about. All of these things are part of our life as Muslims. And so it's important to, like I said, turn the mirror on yourself and just see what's really going on, and how can I make sure that I'm not nursing certain doubts and a lack of security in these relationships, and how can I resolve that? Can I talk about it with someone? Can I make sure that it doesn't become a source of pain for me, that I've become someone perhaps who doesn't even want to listen to a lecture anymore, any lecture, because I feel so alienated or whatever. Obviously you're not in that particular category because you're here, but I'm sure you know people who no longer even have the tolerance to even listen to someone who claims to be teaching Islamic knowledge. So where are we at on that one? Number 11, I'm going to stop at this one. My relationship to acts of ibadah. So in English we call them acts of worship, but ibadah, as we've said before, is that process of going towards a particular destination, seeking a particular destination. And of course our destination is the akhirah, a life with God. So what is our relationship with ibadah? Again, this is a very important question. Sometimes we feel nervous about ibadah. Sometimes we feel anxious about ibadah. We feel anxious about the idea of making extra prayers, or we feel reluctant to read Quran, and we're not even paying attention to that feeling. We just find ourselves day after day not being able to reach out for that mushaf, and we need to stop and actually ask what's going on. Why do I have that feeling? Is it because I feel that my tajweed is not good enough? Is it because I want to have this brilliant and amazing experience, and I'm afraid that if I read Quran I won't feel anything, so I just don't want to even read it? What is it that stops us from engaging in more ibadah? Right? Is it a perception that I have that I'm too busy? So maybe I've made the idea of ibadah really huge in my mind, and it can only happen on a day when I have nothing else to do. And so maybe I need to examine, why have I made it such a big deal? Why can't it be just 5 minutes of dua? Why can't it just be one verse of Quran? Is that not acceptable, or what's going on? Am I being a perfectionist, essentially? So these are the things these are the 5 things that I want us to reflect on today. So does anyone want to share any insights into what we've talked about so far? My relationship with my parents. You don't have to go in order, but yeah, there's a lot to say about that one in terms of the complicated relationships that people have with parents. Perhaps that's always been the case, but in a lot of the counseling that we do here at the masjid, people coming to talk about struggles that they're having, I was quite astounded at the beginning about how many people are coming, and the root of their problems is their relationship with their parents. And the problem manifests in other ways. It manifests in, I don't feel like I want to be religious anymore, or I just got a divorce, or multiple things. And so often it was going back to the relationship with the parents. It was going back to the way that the parents taught Islam to the children, people who are now adults, but when they were children, or the way that the parent intervened and sort of got involved in the marriage and tried to make value judgments on the other spouse, which ended up in discord in that particular situation, and so on. So parents really have a lot of influence and a lot of power over us, and I think that is sometimes exacerbated for us as Muslims, or complicated further for us as Muslims, because we have such a strong imperative to respect our parents, but we sometimes don't know how to draw the line, or what that respect can look like. And sometimes our relationship can become one in which we are emotionally manipulated by our parents, and it's almost blackmailed into a kind of conformity to their wishes. And it's easy for us to believe that we are somehow being good Muslims in that process, but sometimes we're destroying our own faith in that process of trying to keep our parents happy. Which is, I know it sounds funny, but it really is what is happening a lot of the time. So sometimes we have to kind of take a look at that relationship in a way that's based on health and not based on guilt, not based on fear, and just look at it and say, what's working in this and what's actually becoming kind of hazardous to my own well-being or my parents' well-being. It happens as well that we can also be abusive towards our parents. But we need to kind of come to a sense of peace in our relationship with our parents, whether they're alive or whether they've passed already into the other world, because sometimes we hear their voices inside us even when they're not around us. And we continue to hear inside ourselves their way of talking to us. And we continue to judge ourselves in the way that they judge us. So we need to sort of figure that out and come to peace with that, and make sure that we're not living in a shadow that's unhealthy, and take from them the beauty that they have and the beauty that they've given us, and celebrate that and appreciate that, at the same time as knowing that we have to live our own story, and our life is not their life, and we're not an extension of them, we're not an outpost of them. We are individual beings who Allah has created to have our own destiny, and that's okay. That's not selfish, and that's not arrogant, and that's not being a bad daughter. It's just real, and it's okay, and it's healthy. So that's a little bit about parents, and I know that I don't sound like a classical, typical, Islamic speaker, because the classical rhetoric is obey and respect your parents, and that's about it. But there's more to be said about that, and we have to put everything in its right place with love and care. I'm not telling you to rebel against anyone or hate on anyone. I'm not asking you to be, to engage in uquq al-walidain or something like that. Don't take it that way. It's just we have to come to a place of balance and equilibrium and well-being, and sometimes that involves examining our relationship with our parents. So, is there anyone who wants to comment on that? And I just want to say one thing, subhanAllah, we think sometimes that being a good son or daughter, or maybe we have children and we might be making this mistake with them, what we sometimes do is that we're looking for conformity. We're not actually looking for a true unfolding of the other person's spirit into a recognition and a joy in God. It's almost as if parents are afraid that God is not enough to guide their children. That if they let go a little bit, it's going to be over. And this is a real lack of trust in God. I mean, God is bigger than that. God can handle this situation of your child exploring who they want to be and what the truth is. So, if your goal, if your desire is that they have a true, authentic relationship with God, then that's going to necessitate that you allow them to explore what that means and what that looks like. But if your only goal is that they just be a carbon copy of you, and they conform to all the rules, and that's enough, and you don't really care what's going on the inside, then that's a whole other thing. And it's not going to be a healthy thing. So we have to, of course, we have standards and we have ways of doing things, and it's important to impart those things. I'm not saying don't impart any of those things, or that it was wrong that your parents told you, I would like you to dress a particular way, or I'd like you to behave a particular way in our home. If we're being taught those things because there's an understanding that those things are a means to a greater end, that in doing those things you become more permeable to light and guidance, then that's logical and that makes sense and that can be acceptable. But if it's only being done out of a sense of fear and that I have to insist on these things or my child will go astray, then this becomes a very problematic situation for both the parents and the child. And if we look at people like Habib Omar, who is a great sheikh and teacher, and many others who are in that kind of a position, he has a particular life story. In his life story, when he was 8 years old, he went with his father, and he was accompanying his father to pray Jummah, to pray the Jummah prayer, and his father was going to be giving the khutbah. And the father, at that time in Yemen, it was ruled by communists, so each khatib had to seek permission from a certain office that was an authority that could give them the right to deliver the khutbah that they had in mind. So his father entered this office to submit the khutbah, application for permission, and he never came out of that office. He was kidnapped by these authorities, and this 8-year-old Habib Omar was waiting there for his father to come out, and his father never came out, and he never saw him after that day. And the story that's told about this is that his greatest concern was about the jama'ah that was waiting for his father to lead the prayer. This was how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had endowed him with a deeper understanding of how to be in this world. That's not typical of an 8-year-old child. It's not a typical reaction of an 8-year-old child. And he went on to become someone who was very ahead of other children in his spiritual experiences and in his sense of leadership, such that, at a young age he was able to start openly guiding people back to the ways of the ancestors at a time when many of the ulama of Hadramaut and Tarim, which now we think of as being, such a guiding light in some sense for the whole world, or it's very openly a place that teaches about Islam. At that time it was not. Because of communism, everything was quiet and nobody was preaching publicly, and yet he was able to boldly go forward at around the age of 20 and just start teaching publicly and bring back all of those things. This is a unique story, but what I'm trying to tell you, what I want to tell you is that he does not expect that of his children. And he allows his children to just be and to unfold whatever destiny that they have from Allah. And he recognizes that each one will be unique. And he doesn't insist at all that his children follow the same path that he took. And he doesn't, put pressure on them to behave a certain way or to study a certain way. He provides the opportunities, but he allows each child to be their own self. So this is kind of something that if it wasn't done for us by our parents, we need to start to find ways to do that now, perhaps, because it's important for our own spiritual maturity. In our aqidah, we believe it says clearly in our aqidah that if you don't choose Islam on your own, then your Islam is not considered to be valid. You have to make your own decision. You cannot just inherit Islam. There's no inheritance of Islam. You cannot just be Muslim because your parents were Muslim. You can't just be Muslim because you grew up in a Muslim country. So there's a great blessing in actually choosing this for yourself, because everything will flow from there, and you'll start to gain an understanding that you have your own individual, unique journey to make. And subhanAllah, about a month ago, my niece, we had a party for her because she started wearing hijab of her own volition. It's her own choice. And of course you can do things that will help a person to make that choice, but at the end of the day it has to be their choice. So she made that choice, and we had a big party, and she talked about how she decided to do that and all the events that led to that. And with me was one of our sisters who, I believe she's maybe around 24. And as we were leaving, she said, that was so transformative for me, because I never got to have that experience. As a child, I was just forced to wear hijab, or I was just told to wear hijab at a certain age, maybe 7. And I almost felt like today was the day when I got to sort of vicariously live that experience of making that decision and being celebrated for that decision and seeing the beauty of what it means to choose something like that for myself. So these things are not small things. It's important to allow yourself to unfold those things, and if you've just sort of had those things stuffed down your throat in some sense, it's okay to unpack that now and celebrate each thing and look at each thing and decide for yourself about each thing, so that you can truly embrace it and make it make sense for you. Because what is the point of a life that is just full of empty rituals? I mean, you will not gain what there is to be gained from this path. You know, this path is not just about stacking up stuff, stacking up more and more spiritual products that you're producing. To show to whom? I mean, what is it for, really? What is the whole point of even being alive, if not to experience some kind of personal relationship with Allah that is unique to you? It's not borrowed from anyone else. It's as unique as your own fingerprints. It's got its unique contours and texture that is so sacred, because it's something that is almost beyond words, but it's so real between you and Allah. It's full of those moments when He stood by you that nobody else even knows about, even the people who are closest to you. It's full of those mornings when you didn't feel like getting out of bed and He helped you get out of bed. You know, it's full of those times where you felt like nothing has any meaning, and then somehow a breeze came down upon you from Him into your heart and filled you with a sense that I'm looking after you. It's full of those days that seem so dark, but then somehow He sent someone your way who had something beautiful to say to you, and you recognize right away that that was from Him. And that's the whole point of life. It's not about gathering up a whole bunch of stuff that you think is going to allow you to pass through the gates of Jannah, because we don't get into Jannah by our deeds. So this experience of life has to be about making a relationship that has meaning, so that when you stand in front of Allah, there's something vibrating there, that energy between you and Him, and that you long to stand there, and that it's kind of a highlight for you in your day. So all of this is to say that our relationship with our parents has a great influence on how we view sometimes our faith, and we need to make sure that we have space to be our own selves and to form our own personal relationship. And absolutely, we take goodness and we take profound examples from the way that our parents have also lived their lives, and their moments of great faithfulness and trust in God that we've been able to witness. And all of that is a beautiful shining light. And certainly we can take it as our inheritance from them. But at the same time, we have to have our own private and unique relationship with Allah. And one more story is that, I mean, it's really been very interesting for me to meet people who had that kind of experience where they were taught Islam from a very young age in a very rules-oriented way, because it's so hard for me to relate to that experience because my parents never taught me that way. And my mom didn't even officially become Muslim until I was 17. So there was no there were no rules coming from her with regard to Islam during my childhood. And my dad, I don't even know, when I look back at it, I really marvel that I could have had this kind of a gift from Allah, that my dad taught me about Islam and he was learning himself. So he would just teach me little by little as he was learning. And you know, a dua or a hadith that he had heard, and of course there weren't a lot of resources at that time, so it was very much just this, you know, from his, you know, from him to me basically, and not looking up anything online and nothing to, no courses to watch via YouTube, and subhanAllah. And in all of that, even with that paucity of resources, it was such a rich experience for me. You know, maybe I knew like 1 or 2 dua, if that. And I knew them in English. He taught them to me in English, I didn't even know the Arabic. And yet it was such a, I mean, I could experience the presence of God even as a child. And there was really not a lot of pushing in that direction. So all of that is just to say, I guess, that I'm very grateful for that, and also that we don't need to be so afraid that a child or ourselves will not be able to become in touch with Allah unless there are all these things that are sort of pressuring us in that direction. These things are not meant to pressure us. These rules are just pillars. They're just supports to enable you to experience something of beauty and to maintain what you have built so far. They're not meant to be a pressure, and they're not meant to sort of keep you on the straight and narrow as if your own heart and the guidance from God could not do that for you, right? Rules are not meant to keep you on the Sirat al-Mustaqim. It's Allah's guidance that does that. It's not the rules that you follow. So, anyway, Noor, you wanted to say something?
SubhanAllah. Well, a comment to the story that you shared about Habib Umar before I get into the original comment I was going to make. It's so funny because as soon as you were saying that story, and it just resonated with me because, you know, I know that some of my parents' relatives back in Sudan were, you know, critical and may have looked down to a degree on the way that they chose to raise us. And from the perspective that it was like they're too loose with us, or they're not strict enough with us, or whatever. And subhanallah, like their choice to do that, and where they chose to draw their limits without, you know, never once did they ever try to force any of us to wear hijab. And then look at that, you know, 5 daughters, all of them on their own journey at different times, different stages, ended up choosing to wear hijab and be students of knowledge or pursue that. And by all means, none of us is perfect. Yeah, I don't mean to say like, look, they got 5 angels or anything like that. But you see the comparison to a degree versus what you see there with a style that is much more strict and much more rules-based and much more, like, not much liberty or agency involved in it, but it's like, you will do this. And that's just the norm. And the conversations that I have with my cousins and people there, sometimes it's just, you really see the impact of that lack of choice versus the parenting style that was looked down on or criticized, and be like, well, you know, there's definitely value in it. But what I was going to say is that I think that in human nature, it's easier to be critical and criticize than to be grateful and see the good sometimes. And that can translate into our relationship with our parents, where we can see their flaws and their faults and even the negativities in us and draw that back to them. You made me this way, and it's your genes for this and that, and your choice to do this and that, and now I'm like a control freak and it's your fault, and like this and that. But it's harder, or just doesn't come as naturally for us to look at our lives and say, hey, success 1, 2, 3, 4 can be directly drawn back to my parents' choice to do this, that, and the other, you know, and to give them the credit for the good in your life and focus on that rather than focus on any negativities in their choices or their character or in your character that you draw to them or in your circumstances, but to rather be grateful for their role in the good things in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we talk about our relationship with our parents, both things have to be unearthed so that we can really come to a proper evaluation of, as you said, how we need to be appreciative of them and what we need to absolutely recognize and thank them for, even including writing that to them as a letter and actually enumerating, these are the things I really, really appreciate about what you've done for me. At the same time as recognizing, okay, so these are the things that are not necessarily working for me, that I just picked up, even maybe even without them even saying it to me, but I picked up on some of my parents' weaknesses, and I carry them in me, and I see the world in that way. So I see that, I don't know, my mother always worried about her appearance or her weight, and this is something I've actually inherited, and I'm carrying that same way of thinking inside me. It could be something as sort of trivial as that, or something much more serious in terms of how we saw our parents reacting to difficulties, or how we saw them dealing with money or whatever. So it's important for us to have a fair reflection on all of those things, so that we can be able to find our way forward and determine how to go forward and learn how to respond to some of those negative things when they come up in us, so that we can recognize that's not me, that's a product of a particular thing that happened as I was growing up, and I have a choice to say, I'm not going to go down that same path. I have a choice to say, that's not really me, and actually, it's okay if I gain 10 extra pounds. Like, that doesn't matter. It mattered to my mom, and I grew up watching her worry about every little thing like that in terms of her appearance, but I'm not her, and there's no need for me to carry that burden. I can feel joy today in who I am and how I look, and that's okay. So, I mean, maybe that's not your example, but it is an example. Sometimes we have that situation. Sometimes we even have the situation where our mothers sometimes tell us that to our faces, like, you're looking like you need to lose some weight. And so that can be interesting. And how do we feel about that? How do we respond to that? Do we take it on, or do we decide not to take it on? Or so on. Or if our parents are pressuring us about marriage, how do we deal with that? How do we respond to it? Do we take on their concerns, or do we learn to say, okay, I understand that you care about that, but I'm okay with how things are? And it doesn't have to be that you tell them that to their face. It's about you inside and what you allow to influence you. And the reason we're talking about parents is that they tend to have far more influence than other people. So somebody else asking you about that, you can just brush it off. But often when it's a parent doing that, it really has a profound impact on us. And we have to learn how to flow with that and not let it become detrimental to the journey that we're trying to go on, which is a journey that has to be centered around our well-being spiritually above all. And we don't always have a situation where our parents are on the same page when it comes to that, right? They may see that you're doing well spiritually, but what concerns them is what the kind of job that you have, or whether you're married yet, or whether you have kids yet. And so we need to make sure that we draw a line of safety around who we are and what we're trying to accomplish, so that we don't lose our thread. So And that's not an expression of disrespect towards them, and it's not an expression of obedience to them to follow every whim that they're expressing. Sometimes parents are dealing with us from their own ego, from their own love of dunya. And it's not for us to judge them, but it's for us to recognize that that's not my priority. I'm in a different place, and I recognize that that's important for my mom or my dad, but I'm not that person. I've come to discover other things that are more important to me, and I feel secure in that, and I feel confident that it's okay. It's okay to not be married. It's okay to not have kids. It's okay to not have a job that my parents can brag about to their friends. That's okay, right? So it's that kind of a process. Khadija.
I think you kind of answered. My question was very direct. How do we do that? How do we not let it impact us? Because even if we know, okay, it's okay that I'm not going to be a doctor, but it's not okay for them. And that makes us sad. So how do we not, how just for that to not happen so we're not sad? And often when we're sad, we're going to go in defense and be like, well, and just go into an argument. What should that matter to you? And it's not that important, and I'm doing this and that, and you get emotional. So how do you deal with that very practically? I know it probably takes a lot of time, but if you have like few pointers, it will help.
Well, this is an aspect of our spiritual purification and our spiritual journey that we have to, at the same time as saying all this, we have to recognize that there are illnesses and diseases we can have in our hearts, such as arrogance and pride, that can affect the way that we respond to these things. And in having a different position or outlook than your parents, you have to make sure that it's not one of pride, and it's not one that's based on arrogance towards them or ego or I want to prove my point, because then it becomes something that's batil, becomes something that's wrong, it becomes something that's shaitani, and that's not what we're talking about. This has to come from a place of purity and being at peace with God and recognizing that you have a right to your journey with Allah, and that's it. It shouldn't. When it becomes something deep like that, that's a deep acknowledgement of the importance of you going on your own journey towards Allah and accepting whatever circumstance He's giving you, and being at peace with the fact that you are not married and knowing that that's from Him, being at peace with the fact that you are not going to become a doctor or whatever in your circumstance, and that's an aspect of your seeking to please Him and to fulfill your natural potential to be something else other than a doctor, and so on. When that's something that's between you and Allah, then it shouldn't cause you to have an emotional outburst or to behave poorly towards another person. And it really doesn't. When you come to a kind of a peace and a deep feeling that Allah is pleased with what you're doing, then you won't have that kind of, rude response towards your parents or towards anyone, in fact. So when we see somebody, even for example, defending their sheikh, let's say, somebody criticizes your sheikh, or they criticize you for coming to the Rawda, why are you going there? It's crazy people who sing from time to time and stuff like that. You can know that you have a healthy relationship with this place and with the teachers here if that doesn't cause you to become angry from your ego. And there are people who become angry from their ego and they start defending and they start saying all kinds of rude stuff to the other person who may just be ignorant, they may have never come here before, they're just repeating what they've heard. And had you truly loved and been secure in your relationship with this place, you would have found a way to communicate that beautifully to the other person so that they would have that wrong impression removed, so that they would have the blinders removed from their eyes. And that has to be part of how we even see that kind of relationship with our parents. It may not happen through words with our parents, but it has to happen through our behavior, that they begin to see a kind of peace emanating from us, and that there is a great sense of joy in the life choices that we're making. And at the end of the day, for a parent, that most of the time that's reassuring and that's enough. And the reason that they were asking you to be a doctor in the first place is because they wanted to see you happy, accomplished, whatever. And when they see you happy and accomplished in another field, usually that's enough to reassure them. If they see you truly happy and accomplished not being married, that you're truly flourishing and flowering in that circumstance, then again, but it has to be, again, this being secure in who you are, including being a Muslim and dealing with people who are Islamophobic, it has to come from a place of deep security in your relationship with Allah and knowing that Allah is pleased with you, and not in just trying to defend your identity, defend your choices that's coming from your ego, because that will absolutely produce a bad and ugly reaction from you. Then yes, you will be arguing with people, you'll be rude to them, you'll end up being overly emotional, and you do nothing for your cause that way. You only fall into the trap of shaitan, which is to become angry and to mistreat another person. And to show that other person and make them feel like all I had is her best interest at heart, and this is how she talks to me. Especially if it's your mother or your husband or whoever. So these kinds of things, and you have to be careful that your opinion and your belief about yourself does not become more important in your eyes than the relationship that you have with that person. You can have your opinion about things. I can have my opinion about what I need to divest myself of in terms of ideas I accumulated in my childhood from my parents. I can have an opinion and a reflection and a determination about how to do that, but it will never be more important than my relationship with them, the actual quality of my relationship with them. That quality of relationship has to be a priority, so that I have to be kind and forgiving and overlooking and keep all that other stuff to myself so as not to hurt their feelings, because that is the true way of someone who is seeking Allah's pleasure. You have to care about the feelings of others. This is not just we're not looking at this life piecemeal. This all has to come together, and you know very well that not hurting people's feelings is one of the priorities of the religion. The Prophet ﷺ said that it's a bigger sin to break the heart of a Muslim than it is to destroy the Kaaba. So you have to be careful. That's breaking the heart of someone, but as you can understand, even hurting someone's feelings comes close to that. It's in that same realm of danger. It's unacceptable to do things like that. So I certainly don't want any kind of analysis that you make about your relationship with your parents or your spouse or whoever to result in a harshness or a rudeness towards them. You don't have to wear your heart on your sleeve. Keep some stuff to yourself. I don't have to go and tell my parents, yeah, by the way, this and this and this, I've decided to drop it. I realize it was all nonsense that I picked up from you and I'm done with it. No. This is not to be used in that way. That would be completely coming from arrogance and shaitan. And if we have arrogance, this is exactly the place for you to destroy your arrogance, is to be able to have a different opinion and see things for what they are, but learn to shut your mouth for the sake of the other person's feelings. That is exactly where you will learn to fight your arrogance. Where else are you going to get rid of your arrogance? Can you tell me? Where else, other than those kinds of situations, can you finally cleanse yourself of arrogance? That is exactly where. When you know something is right, and the other person is insisting on something else, and you just bite your tongue for the sake of the relationship, and you step on your ego in that moment, and you do that again and again, you will be cleansed of arrogance. Really, you can't go out to some store and buy the pill that will cure you of arrogance. It's not out there. It's in here in your daily life. You're not going to be able to go to some sheikh and say, please, cleanse me of my arrogance. It doesn't work like that. It's going to come to you in all kinds of ways in your own life. The opportunities will be given to you. And it's very much in relationships that you will find that beauty of that experience. To recognize that they also have a right to feel that way. Okay, yes, so I don't want to be a doctor, but I also can recognize in the same moment how much my father wanted to be a doctor and was not able to, and then wished that for me, and I can completely empathize with that feeling, and I understand it, and it would have been beautiful, it would have been great, but it's not happening, and that's also okay. It's okay for me, I'm okay with that, but I'm not going to hold that against him. You have to come to a place of this kind of maturity, that where you can see that there's more than one way of looking at this, And you don't have to fight for your opinion and fight to force the other person to see things the way you see them. Sometimes they'll never see it the way you see it, but they'll appreciate your kindness and your goodness, and that will make up for the other disappointments that they may be feeling about choices you've made in your life. And in the end, they'll come around with your dua as well. Dua is involved in all of these situations. If you really care about one of these things and that's your issue that you're dealing with, and you want it to be a good relationship, you want it to come back to being a truly harmonious relationship, dua is an ingredient you have to add into the situation. Wallahi, it will change things. So your akhlaq, your dua, at the same time is not being cowed down by the other person's opinion. That's all we're saying. Know yourself. Be bold enough to choose the right way that's pleasing to Allah. At the same time as having high akhlaq with them and good adab. And finally making dua, that they come around to feeling rida for you, to being pleased with what you chose. All of these things have to be there in these situations. And finally, an embracing of the opportunity to fight your own ego and to restrain your own ego and to see that this is exactly where I'll find the healing that I need from the disease of the heart that is pride and arrogance. This is where it's coming. This is it. It's my opportunity. It's, as Auntie Tamara said, it's free tazkiyah. Free chance at purification. Grab it. And she said that about, one time, I don't know what it was at that point in the States where people were being, getting comments, whatever. Something had happened in the news and many women were getting random comments thrown at them about that were Islamophobic in nature. And she talked about that. And she talked about, of course, being safe and all of that. And then she said, it's also free tazkiyah for you. Take it. Learn to be insulted by some random person and bite your tongue and just move on. It's not going to kill you. Take it, if you invest it as something that's cleansing and purifying, and I feel like punching that person right now, but I'm going to hold myself back. If you invest it in that way, it will be really great for you. If you only invest it as resentment and anger, that's not an investment towards your own goodness. Yes, that will turn out to be an ugly thing. And so it's really all about investment. And that's going to be a decision that you have to make. How do you want to invest in your own akhirah? You can make that choice. And you can make that choice with advice, but at the end of the day, it's your choice to make. So for instance, I was just thinking about a story that my dad always told me when I was younger about a woman who had a Buddhist teacher, her Buddhist guide. And she had a very tough situation at work. And I don't know if my dad used to tell me the story because maybe he was going through a tough situation at work at that time. Not really sure why. But it works for any tough situation. So she had a really difficult boss. And she went and she told her Buddhist teacher, look, I have this really difficult boss who's always on my case, who's always, picking on me and all this stuff. And he said, that is exactly where you need to be. You're going to stay in that job. That's exactly what the doctor ordered for you. Now, if you are in that situation, a tough situation, where maybe you are being picked on or something like that, if you're not able to invest that towards your own personal growth, to learn lessons like how to be silent, and because I have a big mouth and my normal reaction is to just snap back, I'm going to take this as my chance to really learn to have silence, and to just let that roll off my back and to not react. I'm going to take this as my chance to show kindness to someone I really hate, and I could really cut them down with my words, but I'm going to try to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and actually, this is my chance. I don't know when I'll get another chance like this. If you can do that with that kind of an experience, then it is a true investment in your akhirah. But if you can't, and you're resentful, and you're feeling beaten down by that, and you're getting sick, then get out. You are the only one, though, who can say what's really happening in that situation. Me looking in, I don't know what's happening. I don't know which state you've chosen to be in, or sometimes we're not capable of being in that beautiful high state where we're able to take it as tazkiyah, as purification of our ego. We're just not able to, and that's fine. But you have to know you're in the driver's seat in that situation. You're going to make a decision, and then you're going to be proud and strong in that, and understand that this world is not just what we see. There's all kinds of spiritual stuff going on, and there can be great growth even when you're in a situation that looks difficult on the outside, you can be growing, by leaps and strides on the inside. Someone I know was telling me about a very difficult time in her life where she felt, very ostracized by her community and judged by the community, and it was just a really difficult time for her. And she said, and she had, postpartum depression, and everything sort of was difficult. And she said, but in that time, I would look forward the entire day to tahajjud. The entire day I would be waiting for 3 a.m. for that time when I could get up and spend about an hour with Allah. And she said I would spend that hour with Allah between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. and I would be saying, Ya Allah, I know you love me. I know you love me. And she said, I've never had an experience like that since then. And yet it was a foundational experience, such that it stays with her and it informs the rest of her life with Allah. So it was a time of profound internal growth, even though it was difficult in terms of the actual physical and material circumstances. But she said she wouldn't change it for the world. She wouldn't exchange it for anything else. So it's about how you invest these things and how you choose to see these things and what kind of gold you can make out of these things. You can be an alchemist. You're given certain things and you can turn them into gold for yourself. But these are the choices that we make every single day. What am I going to do with an imperfect world in which I live? What am I going to do with a bunch of imperfect relationships? And you have to believe in all of that, that things can change from night to day. Things can really change from night to day. In fact, in this same circumstance that I was just telling you about with this mother, and she was a single mother already at that time, and like I said, she was going through postpartum. Her children were being judged in the community. There were people who were saying you can't play with this woman's children because they come from a broken home, and so all of this was going on. And subhanAllah, she continued to find her comfort in tahajjud. And subhanAllah, she told me that after that, her son is now around 16. And during that time, as she came out of her depression and so on, she started going more and more to gatherings of dhikr and places of learning, and she would take her children with her. And in particular, she would have her son, who was her eldest, help in those majalis, like serve the tea and clean up and all of that stuff. She just would encourage him to do that. And just last year, the sheikh, who is the leader in one of those majalis where they attend, he was talking about the youth, and he said in front of everyone, including all the people who had judged her before, and he said in front of all of them that of all the people that have sort of offered their families in the service of God, it's this woman who's given her son in the way that's closest to the way that the mother of Sayyidina Anas gave her son to the Prophet ﷺ. So completely raised this person, this mother and her son, in front of all of the community, and she was just reflecting that look at the way that Allah works, and look at these things, how they unfold in the end. So things can change, is what I'm saying. Things change. You can be you can feel that you're ostracized and nobody respects you and all of that, and things can change eventually to a much better situation. And I'll just tell one more story about that. One of the sheikhas that I have in Syria, her story that somebody else told us about her is that when she was a young woman and she first decided to put on hijab, and this is also an answer to the question that was asked last week about how to be courageous and why that's even important. When she first put on hijab, she was 16, and she came from a home where they were very politically active as communists at that time. So this is a long time ago when communism or socialism was very popular in certain Arab countries, and it was seen as the way to come out from under colonial, influence and all of that. And so her brother was a hardcore atheist and communist, and actually, I'm sorry, her father was. And when she came home wearing hijab for the first time, her father took her head and smashed it against the wall until her nose was bleeding, as an expression of how angry he was. And subhanAllah, about 5 years later, when her younger sister was of the age to put on hijab, that same father bought a gold bracelet to put on that girl as a congratulations for her hijab. How did things change from night to day? It was from the dua and the good behavior and the akhlaq of the older daughter, who, even though she was treated so poorly by her father, did not lose her ability to show love and respect to him with a greater goal in mind, with a greater sense of why I need to do this. And of course with the support of her spiritual mentor, because that's not an easy thing to do. But there are stories like this, and they are true stories of patience, of dua in the night, of praying for your parents that they come around and that they see things as they should see things. And nobody here has that kind of an extreme situation, but there are people who live that situation. There are girls I met even in Toronto. I was teaching at a youth camp in Toronto just 2 weeks ago. There are girls there, one of them took off her hijab because her parents pressured her. The other one put on hijab against her parents and is struggling with it. These things are still happening. So it's important to hear stories about how people have had it worse than you, and yet the outcome has actually been altered by the way that they chose to behave in that circumstance. The way they chose to make sure that dua was part of it. As I said, akhlaq was part of how they responded. Good adab was part of how they responded, as well as firm conviction in what they were doing at the same time. So you can be firmly convicted and clear about a path you're going to follow that's against the will even of your parents, if it's pleasing to Allah, while still having good manners with them, while still trying to win them over, while still making dua, and you will see profound results, where things that you never thought were possible could actually be possible. And that part of it is what I wanted to tell you, because we live in a very skeptical world today, where we just assume nobody will ever change. Nothing is ever really going to change. The best I can hope for is that we agree to disagree. And you shouldn't limit yourself like that. Allah can do anything. He can change people's hearts. Just ask. Care enough to ask instead of arguing with them. Turn all the energy that you would have used to have a fight into just shutting your mouth, taking that as free tazkiyah for your ego. Learn, okay, ego, be quiet right now. You want to fight back, but you know what? I'm not going to let you. We're not going to go in that direction. Yes, I'm right, but that doesn't give me the right to be mean and rude. And then you go and take all your frustration and energy and you talk to Allah. And you say, Allah, change their hearts. Guide their hearts. I want them to be pleased with me. I want to live in harmony. And you will see. So, I think somebody wanted to say something. What was it? Who was it? Yeah. Does anyone else want to share anything though? Or ask anything about that?
I'll try to keep it brief. The only thing I would say about my, journey with parents and my relationship with my parents is I definitely didn't get along with my parents when I was younger. I was always a bit of a rebel against their rules, and we were brought up kind of with the rules of Islam, but we weren't really raised in a necessarily active household in that sense. So it was tough for me because a lot of rules were rules, and just with my personality, I always wanted to know why. And because my parents were brought up to do things because they were told to, they didn't really have answers. And so the good thing is that over the years, just through empathy and trying to understand that they were raised a certain way, our relationships have gotten so much better, thank God. And now we're able to kind of sit around and talk about these things. And for them also, it's been kind of a spiritual journey. They've learned a lot more in the last few years. They've definitely become more connected to their I don't want to say their Muslim side, but kind of that side. And I guess the takeaway is my parents are actually doctors. So my whole life I was kind of pressured into medicine, and my siblings were too. And one of my sisters is a doctor, but the rest of us aren't. And so my parents always kind of saw me as their creative child, so the writer, painter. And it was always a struggle for me actually to explain that to them, especially my mom, because up until maybe a year ago, my parents were still asking me about med school. They were like, it's not too late, it's not too late. But just through me doing my own thing, like having my own kind of, I don't want to say career, I don't have a career yet, but God willing soon, just kind of sticking with my path and also showing them how happy it makes me. And they've seen a bit of my actual work, which hopefully, God willing, will be published soon. They're very supportive now, and my mom even tells me, please start painting again, please keep your writing going. It's been a complete change because, like I said, we were always told you have to be a doctor, you have to be a career woman, and you know, these things don't really, it's not necessarily my path. I think God wants me to write and wants me to tell stories about, you know, my parents' lives in Afghanistan. These are the things that I want to do, and I think that's my path, and just sticking with it, I think they've seen that. And so it's taken a long time. It's taken a few years, but they've come around, and I think it's persistence that matters. You have to keep going with it, and also just be strong in what you believe in. And hopefully, you know, God willing, your parents will come around, or whomever it is. I think it comes down to that, and just empathy. And like you said, like my parents, you know, they can't, or they couldn't until recently, practice here in the same way. So there's that side of wanting to kind of keep that going, keep the legacy going, or if they don't have something. And it really wasn't until a year ago or 2 years ago where I just didn't understand their perspective. And thankfully, thanks to God, it's been a learning experience for me. And the reason we get along so much better now is I can understand their perspective. And if, you know, one of my parents is so upset about something, then my reaction is no longer sudden anger. It's more, well, I just ask a question, you know, why does that make you upset? And it's, you know, I'm not really sure when that started or why that started, but it's been very good, so. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so beautiful. Alhamdulillah. Yes, Hiba.
Bismillah. A recurring theme in every example you've given, and even some of the examples that have been shared by other people tonight, is that it takes time. And I know that something I've personally struggled with, and I'm sure many people do, is wanting to see results very quickly, or even tiny microscopic examples of results, even if it's in the full turnaround, whatever the situation is. And I think it's just a good reminder for myself and for everyone that it takes time to plant these seeds and to sow them before we can reap them, right? And only Allah knows what length of time that'll be, but it's important to remember that, you know, whatever the work is, whatever the effort is that we have to put in, we don't know how long it will take, and to not lose sight of that goal just because we're not seeing the results right away.
Just a really quick story to add on to yours about your parents. So for my dad, it wasn't medicine, it was engineering, and so he's an engineer. And
two Muslim professions.
Yeah, exactly, doctor or engineer. So initially, I did want to pursue engineering until I woke up and realized, like, what am I thinking? I hate physics. Like, why would I do this to myself? And so when I told my dad that I was not going to do that anymore, I was going to apply for international affairs, he took it so personally. He got so upset, went on a huge rant about how I'd end up like working in a hut in some like underdeveloped country. And he's like, when you end up, then you're going to end up working at McDonald's, and don't come crying back to me. And I was like, first of all, you're thinking about international development, not international relations. And no, I think it'll be okay. And so that was where he started off, and he didn't talk to me for ages. He was so upset. He took it so so badly. But years later, it's just so funny to think that there was ever a time where he disapproved of that career path, because now it's like he brags to everybody, my daughter this, and my daughter went there, and my daughter does this, and like makes it sound sometimes so much like more glamorous than what it is. But it's just like, hey dad, remember when you didn't want me to do that? And he just kind of brushes it off like, that wasn't really a thing. And subhanAllah, the transformation. And it's really that if you do want something to persist, and that will most likely lead you to success. And like you said, if your parents see you succeeding and doing really well in things, they suddenly forget that they ever opposed it at all. So, subhanAllah.
Yeah, so the key is what can give you that. What I want to say, what I want to emphasize is that what should give us that feeling of confidence and conviction is knowing that if we were to ask Allah, Ya Allah, are you pleased with me in this choice I am making, that we would feel certain that He would be pleased with us. And that's the key. We're not trying to promote ego and egoistic choices and things like that. That's not at all what I'm saying. But we do have often a clear sense of mission and purpose that is authentic, and that we feel this is a God-given talent that I have, and this is a calling that I have. Or you sometimes even have maybe a mentor who is a spiritual guide in your life who says, no, this is good. You could do good with this. So that it's not just about your ego or about something like that, or about opposing your parents for no reason, but that, again, there is a unique trajectory that your life is going to follow, and that's okay. And I wanted to apply not only to our career choices or our choices about education, but truly about our decisions with Allah, or differences of opinion that we have in any situation. We might differ with our spouse about how to raise our children. And even there, you're going to have to make some decisions about where you make sure that you may see something a certain way, but in all of that, there has to be dua. You have to make sure that you're not operating out of your ego. You have to make sure that you're not blowing up your already existing diseases of pride and arrogance and thinking you're better than other people and I know how to do this better. This is not going to have barakah in it. This is not going to have blessing. And you please don't try to stand on my words and say, oh, she said you have to, what you're convicted of, do it. It's not like that. There's an entire process. And in all of that, again, the relationship with that person comes above your own opinion and the stating of your own opinion. But it doesn't mean that you have to give up on the path that you're trying to follow at the same time. Because that is a tension of life. There are always going to be situations like that. But there's a way to work with that, and to be patient with that, and to make dua about that, and to seek guidance about that, and sometimes to compromise. Sometimes you do have to compromise and say, it's fine, I'll do what you're saying. Maybe it's not something big like becoming a doctor. It's difficult to compromise on something that big if you hate it, right? But on other things, certainly, to say, okay, I may, like I said about that example of recognizing some negative things that you picked up from your parents where you don't need to express that to them. Just drop it, know it in yourself, but you don't need to confront them about that. And then in other situations being like, okay, I think I know better than my friend about this particular thing, but does it matter? Do I have to emphasize that to her? At the cost of, at what price? The price of her feelings? The price of the quality of our relationship? No, here's a situation where I can drop it. Here's another situation where it's about my relationship with Allah and my hijab or my life with God, and I'm not willing to drop it. And I feel confident that Allah would be pleased with that decision. So all of it comes back to Allah's rida upon us, and being honest with ourselves, and not having a snap reaction, but truly being introspective about, okay, what do I do in these situations where there is a difference of opinion on how to move forward. And that is exactly why we have mentors and scholars. That is one of their best purposes that they can serve in our life, is for these kinds of situations. It's not to teach you about aqeedah. You all know aqeedah deep in your heart already. That's my belief about most Muslims today. But these are the places where we're falling down and failing, is in our personal conflicts with people, our relationships, and the quality of our relationships, and our ability to recognize opportunities to fight our own ego and to purify ourselves of the diseases which dwell in our hearts. These are the places where we're not seeing what's happening, and we're missing out. And we think that, I don't know when we're going to get rid of the arrogance that we have, or the envy, or the pride. Where are you going to go and get it if it's not in your daily life? The opportunity to heal from that. And alhamdulillah, we have that guidance from Imam Ghazali, even, who is one of the experts in diseases of the heart. And one of the most amazing things I remember in learning that with my teacher is he would after he talks about a disease, and there's so many that you feel like you're done by the time you're finished reading it or listening to that teaching. My friend said, she told me, she said, when we used to sit in that class, I used to feel like I want to just go running, yelling in the street out of how unfortunate I feel that I have all of these diseases and I don't even know what to do with them. So it's quite an intense, learning to realize that, oh wow, I think I have that. Oh, I think I have that too. Oh, I think I have some arrogance too. And then learning about the seriousness of having those things, how it really prevents you from, joy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so one of the things that he does in his teaching is at the end of every description of a disease, he gives about 3 ways of treating that disease. Often it's, being in the company of a teacher or a mentor or a guide, and in many, about 90%, it's being married. So, and my teacher explained that obviously not everybody in life is going to get married, but the reason that's mentioned is that idea of a relationship in which you're going to have 2 heads butting, and you've got to learn to give in for the sake of the continuity of the relationship. And that can be with a sister in Islam, but often we give in to each other more easily as friends, right? Or we kind of go along, whereas sometimes really in a marriage it's like, you're both like, it's my way or the highway, and then somebody has to figure out that actually this is a chance for me to get rid of my ego. So I'm going to jump on that, and I'm going to say, okay, sure, fine, do it your way. And be happy about that, because I know that I'm getting something. Again, I'm investing that experience in my own purification. But it doesn't obviously only apply to marriages. As I'm saying, it's just that the concept is that in those situations when you learn to value the relationship more than you being right, that is a brilliant and wonderful opportunity to grow spiritually and to finally put an end to the diseases that are filling your heart, and that we all walk around with as if there's no big deal and that we're all okay. And yet Sayyidina Muhammad said, a person with even an atom's weight of arrogance will not be able to smell the scent of Jannah, and the scent of Jannah travels for 70 years distance. It's a serious thing. And if only we could see how serious this matter is, we would look forward to the chances when we could be like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, I'll go along with what you're saying, even when you hate that idea intellectually, and you know that you're right, and you know that they don't know what they're talking about, but you know that you have another goal that's more important than being right, that is becoming purified and sanctified so that you can be elevated in the sight of God. And this is where, again, you need to have someone who can point that out to you and say, Ya binti, my daughter, my friend, my beloved, this is your chance. This is your golden opportunity from God to finally finish off that unfinished business you have regarding the diseases you keep carrying around. And that's the role of scholars and shayukh and answers and mentors and ustads and whatever you want to call them in our life. And that's what we should be trying to get in that relationship. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us the opportunity to seek the true investment that can come from those experiences, and to not continuously waste those chances and throw them away like they have no meaning for us spiritually. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, let us seek and ask for and embrace the times when we can learn to bite our tongue and to give in a beautiful way for your sake and for the sake of your rida and for the sake of the relationship. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, allow us to see those things as beautiful. Ya Allah, allow us to see it as something beautiful when people underestimate us and undervalue us and sometimes even disrespect us. Allow us to see that as a chance to become humble and to embrace the beauty of being humble, and to embrace the chance to not mind and to not be demanding of rights. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, allow us to see the world in the way that Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ taught us to see the world, that things are not what they seem, and the most important thing is that you raise us up higher and that we become good in your eyes and not in the eyes of people. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, we ask you by the dua of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, oh Allah, make us great in your eyes and low in our eyes and average in people's eyes. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Allah, make us great in your eyes and low in our eyes and average in people's eyes. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Allah. And when we say low, we don't mean that we're putting ourselves down, but that we recognize our own weaknesses and we don't give ourselves more credit than we're due, and that we have a humble attitude. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, bless us with the beautiful qualities that you bestowed upon Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, and protect us from the harm of the many bad qualities which we continue to protect and we continue to nourish and nurture. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, we've made so many mistakes in this regard. Ya Allah, forgive us and allow us the opportunity to come back to a state of welcoming tazkiyah from you, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, and seeking that purification and hoping to be people who you are pleased with, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, and not people who simply get their way in this life. Wa salatu salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad, Sayyidina Mursaleen, fi kulli waqtin wa hin, Ya Rabbana laka alhamd, wa ila sharaf al-Nabi al-Fatiha. So you can look at the other things that we talked about on your own. Honestly, these are just things that we started to talk about with the beginning of the new season as we were ending the summer. And with any experience of the passage of time, and we had the change of clocks last week, all of these things, as we said before, there are constant reminders that our days are passing, our life is passing, and where are we going? And as we said before, ad-din mu'amala, religion is simply that tapestry of relationships and interactions you have with your parents, with your ibadah, with Allah, with your objects, with all of these things. And so we have to be seeking a constant improvement in those things, and not think that if I simply read more Quran, I became a better Muslim. No, it's really about how your relationships are, because the Prophet ﷺ didn't say ad-din Quran, or deen is how much Quran you read. He never said that. He said deen is how you interact. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us the blessing of seeking His guidance, so that all of these relationships become pleasing to Him and become opportunities for us to come closer to Him. Barakallahu fikum.
Do you want to take the questions from online?
One of them I answered. What's the other one?
The other one is, says, you mentioned the hadith about how you should bury people as though we will see them again shortly. How does that contrast with a story like that of Prophet Yusuf's father, who cried so much that he went blind when he heard that Yusuf was gone? Any light you could shed on this would be appreciated.
So actually, I probably didn't explain myself very clearly. That hadith is from a khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he was actually saying that, he was saying to the people of his time that you don't seem to recognize the finality of death. Yes, that inshallah we will have an akhirah life, but you're almost treating it so lightly. You're not realizing that this is a reminder to you that life is finite. So it's actually the opposite that he was saying, that we treat it too much like, oh, it's okay, I'm going to see these people again, without taking the lesson from it that you have but one life to live. And if anything, you're not. And when we bury someone, we cry, obviously emotionally, for the parting that's there. At the same time, we know we will see them again. But a great part of it has to be about us. That's a huge part of that experience, has to be a reflection on, I am going to be in this position sooner or later. And what does that mean? And we are so resistant to that, and the Prophet ﷺ was bringing this to light. Don't resist that. Don't try to avoid that aspect of your experience when you bury someone. Really get the point. And this is a very And the Prophet ﷺ talked a lot about the passing nature of this life and about akhirah and about focusing on the Day of Judgment. And we really sometimes neglect this aspect of his teaching because it's not pleasing to our ego in any way, and it's not really enjoyable even for our intellect, and it's quite a confrontation in essence. It's confronting and challenging the comfort zone that we want to stay in. And that's not a comfort zone with Allah, it's a comfort zone with our lack of ambition, with our lack of pushing ourselves, right? We want to just feel like, no, it's okay that I miss tahajjud every day. That's okay. That's all right. No, it's not all right. It's not okay. If you think that you're going to die tomorrow, you're not going to think it's okay anymore. You're going to be like, whoa, if I die tomorrow, no, I don't want a single day to pass by. I don't want one more day to pass like this. I'm not okay with it. And that's not to become, again, negative and stuff like that. It's you need to be able to spur yourself forward at a certain point when you're healthy enough to do that. And you know best when you're healthy. So that was what was being said in this hadith. It's about recognizing that you have to make your life something, a work of art and a work of beauty, and to know that you will one day be there. And the Prophet ﷺ said that he himself thinks about death many times a day. And this is one of his ways of being in the world, is to remember death many times a day. And of course, there are so many meanings to that. It's not obviously limited to the sense that this is not going to last, and one day I'll be gone from here, although those things are very helpful. In fact, there was a video I saw recently that reminded me of Akhira glasses. And the video was by Prince EA. Is that how you pronounce his name? Anyway, he's an internet person. I shouldn't say character. He gives very good, he's really interesting, and he gives really good kind of semi-spiritual advice, I would say. Anyway, he had a video about how to defuse any conflict that you're having with anyone. And he has like 4 steps to follow. And one of them was, he was focusing on couples, so he was saying, think of yourselves 300 years from now. And then he had like an image of a graveyard. And he's like, you're going to be gone anyway, and gone and forgotten. So does it really matter what you're fighting about right now? And this is exactly what the concept of akhira glasses is that, alhamdulillah, we don't believe that anyone is truly gone in that sense. You'll be gone from this temporary world, but will it matter in that other life? Will it matter on the Day of Judgment? So think about the big picture. And so certainly remembering your death in that sense can minimize some of the things that we think are such a big deal, and that's important. And at the same time, this beautiful teaching of the Prophet ﷺ is revealing how he at the time of his death, he chose Rafiq al-A'la. I mean, that was his experience of death, was to say, I want to be with the greatest friend. So we can think about that in terms of him saying that, I think about death every day, is also a sense of I think about that moment when I'm going to be with Rafiq al-A'la. I think about that finally coming home to Allah. And it's also a sense of joy and looking forward to it. So you can also understand that from it. There are many, many things you can take from that teaching. It's not only kind of a scary thing, it's also a kind of a joy that we can understand.
Yeah, I just want to share a beautiful dua that a sister put on there. She said, "O our Lord, make every single person who listens to Aissa Shehnaz from the companions of our beloved, may the peace and blessings be upon him in paradise." Ameen.
Alhamdulillah. Barakallahu fikum. Is that everything? Okay, barakallahu fikum.
Allahu ya Allahu, Allahu ya Rahim, Allahu ya Allahu, Allahu ya Kareem. Of you, my Lord, I'm asking the gaze of your affection to heal all wounds known and hidden, diseases and addictions.